I don't know if you can tell, but I'm half Japanese. And ever since I was younger, I've been deeply connected with my Japanese culture. So much so, in fact, that every year during the summer, I go to Japan and I live in my grandmother's house. Now I say live in because I wasn't there to vacation. I was truly living there. I did chores around the house, went to the supermarket to buy groceries, and I even had my own book collection waiting for me over there. But by far the craziest thing that I did was go to school. Yes, you heard me correctly. I went to school even during the summers. Crazy, right? I mean, what kind of a masochist do I have to be to go to school for all 12 months of the year? Going to school in Japan is a completely different experience than going to school in America. For one, you have to change your outdoor shoes for indoor shoes before you even enter the school building. Not to mention, there's no custodial staff, so the cleaning is handled entirely by the students themselves. What surprised me the most wasn't the shoes or the cleaning, though. It was the classroom environment. Let me paint you a picture. You just got to school, you're lugging around a heavy backpack, making your way to your desk, and unpacking your things slowly while you're chatting it up with your friend. Maybe you're talking about a new show, or how hot the weather is, or how hot that one actor was in his new movie. Regardless, as the warning bell rings, everybody sits in their seats, and there may be some idle chatter, but it immediately stops as the late bell rings. The now deadly silent class stands up at attention as the teacher comes in. And you all say in unison, "Ohayo gozaimasu," which can be translated to "good morning." Kind of sounds like a cult, doesn't it? I mean, considering what an American school might look like, it might even be considered a cult. An American school might look a little bit more like this. The warning bell rings, and you can see 2 or 3 students running across the hallway, trying to make it to their class without getting a tardy. You're talking it up with your friend, talking about the new show, or the weather, or the hot actor. And even as the late bell rings, you're still talking. In fact, it takes 2 to 3 minutes before you finally start to quiet down enough for the teacher to give instructions. Even after the teacher finishes giving instructions, you start talking again, and soon the classroom environment is loud and boisterous. To most of you sitting here today, the latter classroom is familiar, maybe even nostalgic. But to the average Japanese student, the behavior displayed in that classroom is insanely disrespectful. I, with the experience of both, have gained a unique perspective on this phenomenon. Here's what I learned. Classroom environments change proportionally to the amount of respect that students and teachers have for each other. Or to put it in more simpler terms, the more respect, the better the classroom environment. If you think about it, it makes a whole bunch of sense. More disrespect means more distractions, which means less learning, and a multitude of other problems. For example, an American high school has around 2 to 3 minutes in the beginning of the class period to settle their students down. While in a Japanese classroom, it is expected to be silent as soon as the bell rings. Other misbehaviors, like refusal to participate, inappropriate language, and horseplaying, is prevalent in American schools, while it is less common in Japanese schools. These misbehaviors cause a halt in the lesson, which affects not only the student who caused the disruption, but the entire class itself. Say a snarky comment was made in the middle of class. The students ooh and ah and laugh at each other, while the teacher desperately tries to rein the class back in. A single comment caused a massive disruption in the flow of the lesson, and already a few students are distracted or unfocused on what the teacher is saying. This behavior happens so often that a study conducted by Dr. Kraft shows that an average American high school will see around 14 to 20 interruptions per day. Another study conducted by Education Weekly tells that these disruptions can add up to almost 23 minutes. 23 minutes a day. Minutes that could be spent learning a new math concept, or reading an English article, or even participating in a STEM project, is instead spent disciplining and warning students. This learning adds up, which can be seen by how math and ELA scores are inversely proportional to interruptions per day. The more interruptions there are, the lower the math and ELA scores. The 2022 Program for International Student Assessment tells us the same story. Countries that emphasize respect in classrooms, like Korea, Japan, and China, are at the top of the list, while the US falls short at around 18th place. Besides academics, teachers have been seen to get more frustrated with their jobs when there's more distractions in their class. When I was in preschool, one of the first things taught by our Japanese school teacher was the importance of greetings. You were told that you had to greet the teacher with a good morning every morning and thank them after every lesson. But when I thanked my middle school research teacher after a particularly wonderful lesson, she started crying. It made me speechless. Why was a simple thank you something to be crying about? Were the students in her class really that ungrateful? That teacher ended up quitting in that year, and when I interviewed her earlier this year, she mentioned how she didn't feel appreciated by her own students. This trend is not only seen in my middle school, but it can be seen throughout the entire nation. A study conducted by the National Center for Education Statistics in 2021 tells us that nearly 10% of new teachers quit within their first year. One of the many reasons being underappreciation, whether that be by the school district or by the students themselves. In contrast, Japanese classrooms only saw 1.9% of new teachers quitting within their first year. So what exactly am I trying to say? Am I saying that American schools are evil? No, that's not the case. In fact, there are many characteristics of an American school that fosters a wonderful learning environment. American schools are known for their collaboration, their creativity, and their freedom of self-expression in the classroom. In Japan, it's rare to see autonomy, especially in your classroom choices. Even if you were to be able to choose your class, most classes are full of note-taking, and it's very rare to see group activities. On the other hand, American classrooms use labs and projects to foster a more cohesive learning experience. I can't count how many times a science project required us to bust out the markers and scissors, or an English project required us to be Hollywood actors, acting out a scene in a book. American classrooms value interaction, but if this interaction is taken too far, it can lead to the disruptions that are seen in our classrooms now. So what is the difference I'm trying to highlight? Well, it all boils down to the baseline of respect. Whether it be due to societal norms or teacher behavior, one culture puts more emphasis on respect in classrooms than the other. When I was young, my grandmother taught me the importance of consideration, how to consider others, how to think before I act, how to make sure that I don't bother others. Do not speak loudly in a public setting. Do not eat before everyone has been gathered at the table. Do not bump into people on the sidewalk. This mentality and these mannerisms were hammered into me as a young child. And while they're not perfect, ultimately they've led me to have a happier environment. By considering how my actions can affect others before I act, I can prevent needless disagreements and arguments. If we take this consider others mentality and we apply it to the classroom setting, wouldn't that be beneficial for the entire classroom in the long run? Do not speak out while the teacher is talking. You don't want to disrupt the flow of the lesson and cause other students' learning to be halted. Do not use foul language in the classroom. Not everybody wants to hear the F-bomb dropped after every sentence. Do not make snarky or mocking tones towards your teacher. Teachers are people too, and they shouldn't be disrespected like that. Do not act until you have considered the consequences of your actions towards other people. What may seem like a boring class to you may be the only reprieve for another. It'd be unfair to take that away from them. These all may seem like simple rules and expectations, but you'd be surprised by how many of my teachers don't set them in the beginning. If teachers take the time and effort to set these rules and expectations and enforce them, they can see the benefit in their own classrooms as well. Teachers can show respect to students by setting these minimal expectations, and they'll see that respect reciprocated back onto them. So while American schools might never end up like Japanese schools, with their cultish greetings and thank yous, it'd be good to take a page out of their book and set these baseline expectations in order to foster a more welcoming learning environment. An environment that encourages creativity, collaboration, self-expression, while still being able to learn. An environment that all learners would want to be part of. Thank you.